Today, we're going to talk about the unforgettable night, or a night to remember. Stay in the light. Okay. You're wandering already.
It'll be a reminder for our team.
Okay. Stay in the light. The unforgettable night. We'll talk about that again here in just a minute. But just to review a little bit what we did last week, do you realize that this is the third week we're talking about unleavened bread, talking about Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread? It's not by my design. That's how it's broken down into the Torah portions. Last week we said, the Bible said, verse 24, and you shall observe this thing as an ordinance for you and for your sons for forever. And it's the third time that this whole concept has been emphasized. Observe, it's literally the word shamar in Hebrew, shamar. Means observe, doesn't only mean observe, it can also be translated as guard or to keep. So he's saying that it's going to come to pass when you guys are finally in the land, when you go to the land, which they should have been only about 11 days away, 2 weeks away, which the Lord will give you just as he promised, you shall keep this service. That word keep up there would be the same word observe, guard it, keep the service. So that's in 2 verses there. And in the years to come, when your children ask you, why are we doing this? That you shall say, it is the Passover sacrifice of the Lord who passed over the houses of the children in Israel, in Egypt, when he struck the Egyptians and he delivered our households. So, this is telling me that if we are part of Israel, you will take part in the Passover. It's kind of like Passover is not optional. If Passover is not optional, Feast of Unleavened Bread is not optional either, because they're connected. They're entwined to one another. We'll talk about it. But this word delivered down here, look what that means. It's the word nathal. It literally means to, this is the definition, to snatch away, to deliver, to rescue, to save, to plunder. How he struck the Egyptians and delivered our households. Remember last week we had Captain Bill stand up here by the door? And literally the word Passover is about he's not going to allow the destroyer to enter into your house and to destroy you. That's literally the concept of what it means. Pesach / unleavened bread, the unforgettable feast. For a night to remember. Today, Passover may be a dinner that takes place once a year. We all get together and celebrate it together. But it's joined to a 7-day feast called Unleavened Bread. And we're supposed to make this whole week, 1 day plus 7 days, a memorial every year. Each year we're to remember what happened this night. Let me say that again. Every year, we're to make a memorial out of this 1 night plus 7 nights, and we're to remember what happened that night. It's to be unforgettable. This is a parent speaking to his kids. Let's think of it that way. Father God speaking to his kids, telling them that this time should be an unforgettable time every year. An unforgettable night every year. Okay? Now, just to emphasize that a little bit, I did this. So you're just going to have to bear with me because these are 2 of my favorite people. The unforgettable night. Help me count to 3. Across the generations.
That's what you are.
This one's in sync. That one.
Has someone been in every way and forevermore? That's how you stay. That's how you stay. That's why, darling, it's unforgettable, yeah, every way, and forevermore, that's how you stay. That's how you stay. That's why, darling, it's
Isn't that neat? That just depicted a very beautiful kind of a scene from God's love book for you. He has a love song that he has written to you. It's called the Torah. It's called the Gospel. It's called the letters of Paul. He loves us. And he doesn't want us to forget. He doesn't want us to be afraid, and he doesn't want us to forget. It doesn't matter what's going on in our lives and how much can we screw things up? Yeah, we can. But he wants you to know, and he doesn't want you to forget how much he loves you. And it's just that simple, and it's to be passed down from one generation to the next. And that's where mostly human beings drop the ball, is we don't pass it down to the next generation. Even though he tells us, hey, tell your kids and tell your children's children. That would be your grandchildren. Interesting, huh? It's just that simple. If we just told our children and we told our grandchildren about the Passover, about this unleavened bread that we're going to have a little demonstration of here in a little bit, we'd probably fix the world pretty quick. But we don't, so it's not, even though that's what he said to do. But we can work on it. We can work on it. Amen. Night to remember. So let's just remember a couple things about Passover and unleavened bread. The Passover takes place on the 14th day of the first month. We all know that. The meal is to be prepared on the 14th day of the month. The lamb that they killed that year, they only killed one lamb, or put the blood on the door one time, right? And that had to be killed on the 14th day of the month, right? Roast it. Don't boil it, roast it, he said. Follow the recipe. The meal is then eaten with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. And this is the first night of the I just jumped ahead of myself. The meal is prepared on the 14th and eaten the evening, which is the beginning of the 15th. This is where we get in trouble because we can't count, we don't know how to tell time. Okay? But in God's calendar, The day begins in the evening, right? So if we kill it on the 14th by twilight, that's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, eat it that night. That night is going to be, the next day, it's going to be the 15th, not the 14th. Got it? Okay. The meal is to be eaten with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. And this is the first night of 7 nights that unleavened bread is to be eaten. Okay? So the 14th day is all about preparation. The 14th day of Nisan, of the Passover, of the first month, in Yeshua's day, was the time his trial. The lamb was being prepared, if you will, right? Okay, his blood was being splashed all over the streets of Jerusalem, if you will. We're to remember the events of this first night of unleavened bread. And we're to tell our children and our children's children all the events that happened that night. The blood of the lamb was put on the doorpost. The lamb was roasted, eaten with bitter herbs and unleavened bread. And the Israelites were to eat it in haste. What does haste mean? Quickly, yeah. And they had to be ready to go at a moment's notice. Now, let's remind each other. You remind me. We're talking 3 million people. Stay in the light. Remind me to stay in the light. We're talking 3 million people, all of their livestock, all their stuff, plus all the plunder. They just plundered Egypt as well. That's a lot of stuff to be ready to go in a hurry. Tell the children it's not just for the kids, but for all the children of Israel, the story of the deliverance from Egyptian bondage, the hard labor that had been imposed on them, and Yah's concern for his people. God is as concerned for his people today as he was back then. He's concerned about what's going on in your life. He's concerned about it. He wants to talk to you about it. He has things to tell you about what you should be doing. Okay? I mean, it's all there. God is the real deal. We're to tell them about the 10 plagues, and finally we're to tell them about the redemption of the nation. And this thing must be retold. It's the law, if you will. It's the story of salvation. It's not just Jesus loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life. It's more than that. It's more than that. And for some people, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised for the vast majority of the people. Jesus loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life is as much as they're ever going to learn. And that's going to be enough to get them into God's kingdom. Okay? But I don't know. I want to know more. Do you want to know more? I want to know more. I want to find out how this all happened. So in our Passover Seder, Yeshua is the Passover lamb, and his blood is the mark on the door of our house, and he has become our great salvation. That's the story we need to be, both ends of the story, we need to be handing down to our kids and our grandchildren. And Passover marks this pivot point. It's a paradigm shift in the lives of Israel's kids. And if we observe Passover and our lives remain ridden with leaven of slavery to the world, it doesn't work. It won't work. Then the observance is hollow. So, we're going to talk about what is the purpose of the Pesach Seder observance and keeping the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And when we become part of Israel, we're to remember this pivotal event. Okay? And this is what we're going to talk about here in the next couple minutes. We're to remember that we are part of a covenant people. You have a covenant with God. You're part of that. You're a participant in that. You belong to him. And if you belong to him, the part of his covenant towards you is he's going to take care of you. Wow. Wow. This is the whole thing is the basis of our adoption into his family, because how many of you know once we come to Yeshua, we are adopted. We are one of the adopted kids into God's family. We're adopted. Yeshua is the only begotten. The rest of his kids are all adopted. Sure. The foundational importance of the Exodus is the revelation of God's way of redemption. He has his way of doing things. And when he doesn't just do things just to do things. He does things to teach us how he's doing things. He is really the teacher, we're the student. So this message of adoption is to be passed on to our kids. So, if we observe Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, but our lives are still in slavery to the world system, we don't have much of a witness, do we? That's why in Micah 6:8 it says, "Come out of her, my people." Out of who's her? The world system, right? How about this one? What will be a lasting testimony to our children is when they observe us walking in righteousness and humbly seeking forgiveness from God and from others when we do sin. Proverbs 21:3 says, "To do righteousness and justice is more desirable to the Lord than sacrifice." God is not interested in sacrificial animals, especially now. This is what he desires. Righteousness and justice. Us walking with him that way. And passing this message of freedom in Yeshua to the next generation is a daily process. It's not an event, it's a daily thing. It's a daily walking out. Not only in the major decisions of our lives, but also even in the more importantly, in our everyday actions, what we do. Decisions, major decisions that we make about our future, and everyday actions, they all ought to reflect who this God is that we serve. And he says, "Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who's in heaven." Matthew 5:16. So, there's only two choices. There's only two. The observance of Passover and unleavened bread is for the children of Israel because they are adopted firstborn of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. The God of Israel gave his only begotten Son that we could come into his kingdom as adopted children. We need to know this. We need to not be in doubt about that whatsoever. We are either an adopted child of Israel or else we are a child of the world system. That's your choices. Two. One of his kids were part of the world system. Child of Israel. Okay. Child of the world. Up until this time, he, meaning Pharaoh, really didn't take Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh very seriously, did he? This Pharaoh, who looks kind of familiar to somebody, to me anyway, but remember, this guy thought he was God on earth and he wanted to control the world. Babies born alive had to die, expected royal treatment, subjects were expendable, he was a socialistic dictator, anti-Semitic speeches, does this sound familiar? That's exactly what the world system is out there doing right now, exactly. Okay, so Psalm 94:7 says, the unbeliever says, the Lord does not see, he doesn't understand, he doesn't care. Hebrews 10:31 says, it's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God, and that's exactly what Egypt just went through. Up until now, Pharaoh treated Yah as a nuisance. He's a nuisance God, for crying out loud. He said, but not a terrible threat. The crops will grow back again. Things will get back to normal eventually. But you can't replace your firstborn. Whoa. At some point in our self-reliance, we come face to face with the Almighty, and our mocking of making believe, of a make-believe God will turn to woe. He is not a make-believe God. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is not a make-believe God. Yeshua is not a make-believe Messiah. He's the real deal. And we don't want to treat that in vain in any way. So So this is what the Exodus story is about. There is a God, and it's not us. And we can't save ourselves from the bondage of the world system. And we need a Savior. And guess what? It's not us. All right. These were actual, I didn't make this up. These were actual pictures on magazines.
They were?
Yep.
Wow.
The first,
what date?
it says the first Pharaoh president.
What date?
It's the date's right up here, 2000 and I don't know, something. There's the date. Isn't that amazing?
Right after the Nobel Peace Prize.
Probably.
Probably so, that's right.
Probably so.
Yep. Wow. I guess I missed that one.
Neither, so the point being here is, and this should be very readily recognizable to us now, neither does the deep state take Yotei seriously.
I think that's Photoshopped.
You think that's Photoshopped?
What was the date?
It says right here, the first Pharaoh, I don't know.
I know, I think so. I think
You think so?
the Christian person was putting it out there like it was.
Okay, could be. Well, it's very apropos.
It is.
This guy's operating behind the scenes now, pulling all kinds of strings, right? Yeah. The truth is. So, here we are, Exodus 12, 29 to 51, and we want to know why in the world are we still talking about this 3 weeks later? One chapter, and we're still talking about it. Okay? I remember very distinctly Obama saying, they compared him to Pharaoh, and he says, I do kind of look like him, don't I? Do you remember? I remember that out of his own mouth.
Like Tutankhamun.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, toot and holler or somebody. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to start with, in chapter 12, verse 29, we're going to go through 42. And this is about how to get out of here and how in the world did this happen. So, can you see, Steve? You're backlit over there, right? You can see. 12, 22 to 29 to 42. Jose, can you see? Okay.
The 10th plague, death of the firstborn. And it came to pass at midnight that the Lord struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of livestock. So Pharaoh rose in the night, he, all his servants, and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not one house where there was not one dead. Then he called for Moses and Aaron by night, and said, Rise, go out from among my people, both you and the children of Israel, and go, serve the Lord as you have said. Also take your flocks and your herds, as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also.
Wow.
And the Egyptians urged the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, We shall all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, having their kneaded bowls bound up in their clothes and on their shoulders. Now the children of Israel had done according to the word of Moses, and they had asked from the Egyptians articles of silver, articles of gold, and clothing. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they granted them whatever they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. Then the children of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides children. A mixed multitude went up with them also, and flocks and herds, a great deal of livestock. And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough which they had brought out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were driven out of Egypt and could not wait, nor had they prepared provisions for themselves. Now, the sojourn of the children of Israel who lived in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, on that very same day, it came to pass that all the armies of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. It is a night of solemn observance to the Lord for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. This is the night of the Lord, a solemn observance for all the children of Israel throughout their generations.
Not just that one generation, but throughout their generations, throughout them, okay? All right, let's unpack this a little bit. So about midnight, he smote all the firstborn of Pharaoh He sits on the throne of the prisoner in the dungeon and all the animals. And this was, he gave them a warning about this back in Exodus, I think, chapter 4, I think it was. Remember the first warning, Israel is my firstborn. Let him go or I will kill your firstborn. I will kill your firstborn. And it took through 10, this is the 10th judgment now that he's had to go through. So the judgment of God against his enemies is awesome and it's terrible. Keep that in mind as we're entering into this new decade. I can't even imagine, but the sounds of the cries coming throughout all of Egypt, and everybody heard it in house after house after house after house after house. What do we know about Pharaoh? He didn't die. Therefore, he not a firstborn, right? But he had one.
And it wasn't just children, it was adults.
No, yes, exactly. All the adults, right.
And all the animals.
And all the animals. That's exactly right. If you were a firstborn in your family, doesn't matter what generation you were in, you were gone. This is a picture of God's wrath upon his enemies. And he said, I will make a difference between Egypt, or think world system, and the children of Israel. With Egypt, firstborns are dying all over their country. Weeping and wailing is heard throughout the land. For the children of Israel, firstborns are safe with the blood of the lamb on the door. They are eating lamb with bitter herbs and unleavened bread. They are dressed and ready to go. They have dough in their kneading bowls. That's quite a contrast between one and the other, isn't it? This is going on in one group of people's house, and this is what's going on in the children of Israel's homes. God's firstborn. Hebrews 12:23. Let's put that up, what the Hebrews have to say about us, the book of Hebrews. You have come to the meeting of God's firstborn children, whose names are written in heaven. This is you. Insert your name here. Okay? You have come to the judge of all the people and to the spirits of good people who have been made perfect. Now when we think made perfect, we think perfect. It probably does not mean the American definition of perfection. We're being made justified to stand in his presence. And the only way we can do that is through Yeshua. Right? He's the way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes to the Father except through him. So, come to a meeting or assembly. It's the congregation or the church of God's firstborn. The first son in the family received a special privileges and greater share of the inheritance, and all of God's people are now firstborn. You're going to be receiving and are receiving an abundance. Okay? More than just well, here you go, honey. It's not like, who was it, Rockefeller, that handed out dimes in the Great Depression? Stood on the corner and handed out dimes to people who were standing in food lines? That's not the kind of inheritance he has in mind for you, Tina. Thank God.
That was pretty good.
That was pretty good in the Depression, but I'm telling you, there's more. Okay, children whose names are written, they're registered as citizens in heaven. You have come to the God, the judge of all people. That means everything. He's the judge of everything. And to the spirits of all good. That means righteous. Who have been made perfect. He sees you as righteous because he sees you through the eyes of Yeshua. And he thinks Yeshua is just pretty perfect. You're looking at me like I'm quizzical. If anybody has anything to say, please say it. Okay. Finally, Pharaoh says, okay, you guys, get out of here. Get out and stay out. But before you go, pray for me. I just think that was the nerve. Well, take your flight. Be gone and bless me. 31, 32, 33. And the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading troughs being bound up in their clothes on their shoulders. So we're going to talk a little bit about dough. It's the word Pesach. Pesach?
I can't read the ballpoint.
Pesach, I think. Dough, it's literally flour and water mixed together. And dough is considered to begin the leavening process 18 minutes from the time it gets wet. And Myra actually did this yesterday, so you want to come up here and tell them what it is you did? This is very interesting. Colorado, 2019.
So, if you want to bake unleavened bread, then you have to bake it inside of 18 minutes. And the reason is because there's so much wild yeast in the air that the yeast in the air will leaven the bread. And so I thought, sure. Let's give it a try. So I made up some dough. I used whole wheat flour because I figured that would be more susceptible to yeast in the air. And this is the same batch, and I cut it in half, and I baked this piece immediately in the oven. And I'll pass it around, you can look at it. It's very smooth, it's very flat, it's got one little bubble of yeast over here. It was probably in the flour, but it's very smooth and flat. It's obvious it has no leaven in it. This one, same batch of bread dough. This one, I waited about 30 minutes because I realized that my house is probably a lot cleaner. The air in my house is probably a lot cleaner than the air they had, because they're right out there in the middle of the fields and the crops and the animals and everything else. And so I gave it 30 minutes, and then I baked it, and it's all puffy. You can see bubbles in it.
Like blisters.
Like blisters.
Yeah.
That is leaven that came to this bread dough without me doing anything. I just left it sitting there on the counter.
Air bubbles.
Yeah, this is leavened.
Leavened.
This isn't completely leavened, but you can see the effects of leaven in it. So the short story is, if the scripture says they baked unleavened bread, then they had to do it before 18 minutes had passed. Right?
That's right.
So, take a look. I'll leave it on the plate to make it more official.
And even in Israel today, with unleavened bread, that is a regulation that the matzah has got to be baked within 18 minutes of it being mixed up in order for it to be kosher for Passover. That's one of the requirements. So I was looking at that bread this morning, and that almost looks to me like it has leprosy. You know, and leprosy is a sign of sin, right? Yeah, being unclean. Very interesting. Okay, so from this is just water being added to flour. From this to this matzah. The entire process of making matzah takes only a few minutes, and it has to happen within 18 minutes up there. It's amazing. So what's happening? I have a note here about rustic breads. What rustic breads are, which is what Myra was literally talking about, is consisted of grains that were crushed and soaked in water and kneaded into a dough and allowed to ferment by naturally occurring yeast for some time before they're being baked. So if you're making a rustic bread, you're not adding brewer's yeast to it, right? You're just letting the air happen to it. So this is the Feast of Unleavened Bread that we're talking about here. And what's the difference? Okay, unleavened bread, the term unleavened applies to bread that's made only from water and flour that is not allowed to ferment. And that is the matzah. And that's what we celebrate every year to commemorate the Exodus of them eating unleavened bread as was instructed in the Torah, Exodus 12:17 to 19. And it looks like kind of like that. And so here's what we need to be able to count and tell time. Passover is an event. Started on the 14th, put the blood on the door, roast the lamb. In their world, happened on the 14th in the afternoon. We just talked about that, I think. Good, I This is a repeat. Dinner is the feast of unleavened bread. In the evening of the 15th, eat the lamb with bitter herbs and that unleavened bread. In their world, eating dinner happened on the next day, or the 15th, which is that evening, even though it was only a few hours later. Okay, so here's what I want you to see what happened. Steve read this to us. That's a terrible choice of colors, Miller, because you can't see that probably, can you? Okay, let me do it this way. This is better. Okay. So this action has already, this is verse 35, 36, 37, 38. That's already happened. The prep work done on preparation day. They borrowed the silver and the gold. Egypt was giving them great favor, and they journeyed to Ramses to Sukkot, and they mixed up with the mixed multitude. They went up. We'll talk about these words here in just a minute. But verse 34, which comes before verse 35, right? Talks about, so the people took the dough before it was leavened, having their kneading bowls on their shoulders. And here's verse 39. So 34, 35, 36, 37, 38. This has already happened here and here. So people took the dough before it was leavened, having their kneading bowls on their shoulders, and they baked, 39, and they baked unleavened cakes of dough, which they brought out of Egypt, for it was not leavened. It was not leavened. If the Bible says it was not leavened, it was not leavened. Right? Okay. Because they were driven out of Egypt, they could not wait, nor had they prepared provisions for themselves. They had all these people, they had all these animals, they had all the gold, the silver, and all that material, and all the stuff they were taking out, but they hadn't provided provisions for themselves. All they had was some dough in their kneading troughs. Okay?
They baked.
Yep, they baked.
They baked before?
Nope.
Okay.
When they got out. Nope. When they got out.
Why did they say they baked?
Well, I don't know. We'll find out here in just a minute.
Okay.
And the people took the dough. There it is again. And they baked unleavened, because right here, and they journeyed from Ramses to, they're out of Egypt. And they baked unleavened bread, unleavened cakes of dough, which they brought forth out of Egypt. Verse 39, Jeff. They're out of Egypt. Is that out of Egypt? Does that say out of Egypt? Okay. For it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt. They were thrust out of Egypt, and could not tarry, neither had they prepared for themselves any victual. That's King James, okay?
How far is it from Ramses to Sukkot?
We don't know, they don't even know where Sukkot is.
Oh, okay.
They don't even know where it is. They don't know where it is. Well, we'll get into that in just a minute, I'll show you. So if we were to take all of these away, and that little bracket away, and we were to put 34 to 39, this is what happened. Those verses, 35, 36, 37, 38 had already happened. They were already in Sukkot. Okay, they had collected everything. They were already in Sukkot. Let me back it up. Well, watch this. They had borrowed the gold, gained favor of the Egyptians. This is all done on preparation day. Take this away, take that away, and put this down together, 34 and 39. And they took dough, and they baked unleavened bread when they were thrust out of Egypt. They brought it forth out of Egypt, okay? Makes you just wonder. They borrowed it, yeah, they lent it. This is when they were plundering the Egyptians. This is verse 36. The Lord gave people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they lent unto them. In other words, they spoiled them in the PL. They literally paid them. They plundered. This is when they were plundering Egypt. Now, how could one go out of Egypt and bake unleavened bread before it became leavened, if it leavens in 18 minutes? Have you ever been in a, what's the biggest crowd you've ever been in?
Disney World.
Disney World. How many people, New Year's Eve, how many people are in Disney World on New Year's Eve?
20 million.
No, they're not.
Might be a million there.
A 500,000, okay, I can't even imagine, okay.
Or Times Square with New Year's Day.
Times Square with New Year's Day. New Year's Eve. Maybe 1 million?
Yeah.
Maybe 1 million. We're talking 2.5, 3 million people here. 600,000 people plus the kids and the old people and the animals. We're talking, we don't even have 3 million people in Colorado, maybe. Yeah, we do? All right. Denver's, last I checked, Denver was, the population of Denver County itself was 500,000 people.
Oh, really?
Not the suburbs, but the, anybody know? Huh? 35 what?
3,500,000.
In Colorado?
Yeah.
Okay, 3 million, oh, that's a good number. 3 million, so we're thinking about moving everybody in the state of Colorado.
5.6 million.
Okay, all right, let's go. Wyoming's not big enough.
Okay.
Let's just think about all the people in Wyoming.
200,000.
And I laughed, so it's, anyway. I can't even imagine what it would be like to move 3 million people and get them out of town in one night, let alone in 18 minutes.
Just
Okay.
think about those hurricanes that they have in Florida. Everybody's on the freeway.
There you go.
Everybody's trying to escape on those two
There you go. There you go.
And they're loaded up with stuff.
That's a very good example. Yep.
I noticed too, you said your flocks and your herds, so that's why I was trying to look up how fast does a chicken walk? Well, they run 9 miles an hour. If you're trying to herd chickens or,
Yeah.
what their fall was, but think about all of it.
Yeah.
Goats and sheep
Even
and.
18 hours would be like
Right.
a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the next question then. So you get an idea of how many, I mean, of a large crowd of people and animals and so forth that we're dealing with. So what's up? This is from verse 37. They journeyed from Ramses. That is the word Nasa, or NASA, if you will, you know? Okay? It literally means to pull up, to set forth of the wind. And a mixed multitude went up. This is the word Allah, to go up or to ascend. Went up with them. Out of Egypt. Same word that was used when Adam and Eve were removed from the garden. Did God just go, Adam and Eve, there's the door? Or did God thrust Adam and Eve out of the garden? He thrust them out. Do you think if he thrust Adam and Eve out of the garden, he's able to thrust these people out of the world system? Makes sense. They were thrust out of Egypt and they could not tarry, neither had they provisions for themselves. Thrust out is the word garash. They did not question. They didn't question. I just think that's interesting. All they had was the dough in their kneading bowls. That's all that they were aware of that they even had. Stop and think about it for a minute. And the next, I had the dough in my, can you just hear the women talking? Oh, we had the dough in the kneading bowl, and the next thing you know, I was baking bread and I didn't know where I was.
Can you imagine what was going through their mind? I mean, they're like, what? I was just, and then all of a sudden
Have you ever had a dream? You were dreaming and you knew exactly what was going on in the dream, and then all of a sudden you were awake? Right? It must have been a little bit like that. Can you anybody snap your fingers? That fast. That fast. Now, let's look at distances here just a little bit. This is Egypt. This is Saudi Arabia here, right? Here's the Sinai Peninsula. This is Egypt. And this is Egypt. What's this right now? Israel. And so here's the Hittite Empire, here's Babylon, these will come into play later. But this is the big world power now, and this is what they're controlling. They're not controlling this. This would be the closest out of Egypt we could come to. Right? Are you with me? Where is out of Egypt? Here's another map. Here's the Sinai. The green part is Egypt. They controlled all of this down here and all of that up there. This is by the way of the sea, right? That makes sense that they would have control over that, the trading posts and so forth. So this circle here is out of Egypt. And this little area right here, Nueva, and Sonia's brought us a really good video series that we'll be getting into in the next couple of weeks at the 2 o'clock hour, crossing this Nueva here, over here into, and here's Mount Sinai down here. Okay? So they're up here. There's Goshen. And they don't know exactly where Sukkot is, except that it's out of Egypt. Here's a satellite shot that I just put some lines in there that would cover that same area. So this is the this whole thing area down here is the Red Sea, and this is that finger thing that comes up. Here's I think this is Nueva right here, this beach. So they're going to go out of Egypt. Somehow God just picked them all up and put them down outside of Egypt, and the first thing they did was bake unleavened bread in 18 minutes. Do you think this is something to be celebrated? Yeah. Do you think this is something that people should know about? And what do on Passover night? We start talking about all the plagues that come through. We don't talk about this because people don't know this. Why don't they know this, Terry?
We don't talk about it.
Because we don't talk about it. That's why I've been taught, you know. I know, that's why we talk about it, right? So somehow, he picked him up and put him down here. And you see this little valley right here? This little trough? That's where they walked down. So he probably put him down here. It probably took him 2 days to get down there to the beach.
There's that upper one. That white one?
This one?
Yeah, look at the other map.
Okay, this one. This one. Okay, this one here. Well, there's a doodah thing here. I would love, does anybody want to walk that with me? I want to walk, that's the trip I want to take. And you can't do it yet. But soon and very soon, maybe. This is Saudi Arabia. This is Visa, no, you know.
Oh, no, that's Egyptian.
This is Egyptian.
That's Egyptian.
Oh, Egyptian.
Saudi's across the water. That's Saudi. Where
This is Saudi.
Yeah.
That's right. It's the Sinai. Who's in charge of it? Sinai? And Israel gave it back to Egypt, right? Okay, well, that's good. All right. So they were to eat this unleavened bread for 7 days. For 7 days, there should be no leaven found in your houses. If anybody eats it, that person will be cut off from the congregation. You shall eat nothing leavened in all your dwelling places. You shall eat no unleavened bread. He says it 3 times. They left in a hurry. They were thrust out. They did not tarry. They had no provisions. Well, think about this. In one moment of time, in one evening, one nation is judged and the other nation is redeemed. Did I say we had 2 choices a few minutes ago? We have 2 choices. We can either be judged or we can be redeemed. You know, I don't know which team you want to play on, but I want to play on the redeemed team. And this is all at the end of 430 years from the time of Abraham to the time of the Exodus was 430 years. And that's a good average time for many of these empires to be in control of things before God says, okay, you've gone too far, and now we're going to change things up. Tell me how, this empire, I don't know how old we are, but at any rate, we're not 430 years old yet. But if we go all the way back to the Pilgrims instead of the Revolutionary War, how old are we? 2020 minus 1620 is about, I don't know, 400 years. We're getting close. Okay, so let's just talk about that. I could live another 30 years. I could.
If you want to go.
I'd be 100. Oh, come, Lord Jesus. Okay, so tell me what we just talked about. What happened? Children of Israel, I mean the children of Egypt, the firstborns all died. Then what happened?
A miracle.
A miracle. It's a miracle.
15 minutes later. Well, it had to be shorter than that because they had to put the fire, they had to do the fire to make the bread.
Well, when they left, Father was taking the fire pot with him, so he had the fire pot, everybody's ready to go. They're dressed, they got their sandals on their feet, they're dressed, they've eaten the lamb, they've followed everything, right? They got the kneading bowl.
Oh, in the fire pot.
In the fire pot. And what'd you tell me this morning about Mom gets up in the morning and does her natural, it's just a natural thing to do.
Well, yeah, so all the way through time, everywhere, all of it. You get up in the morning and you mix up your dough, right? And then you just let it sit there on the counter. Yeah. You let it sit there while you do your other chores, and then in a given amount of time, you come over. Now it's all puffy from the yeast in the air, so you just bake it and you have tortillas.
Tortillas, right.
Soft.
Every morning, right? See? Tell me these people, these guys aren't from Judah. Boy, you guys are from Judah because that's I remember Bernadette telling me that her grandmother would, every morning they would have these soft tortillas. It was a wonderful thing to be fresh tortillas, warm, made you feel good, right? Every morning. That's a holdover from that. At any rate, so the fire pot. So I said, well, how hard is it to start a fire? Well, okay, how far?
Why would they
Take a fire pot because that's how they took it.
Everywhere, everybody took it with them. The pioneers brought it across the thing, so you'd have coals, so you'd have fire.
Yeah.
You'd have hot coals.
Hot coals?
Hot coals, yes.
Traveling, you would get hot coals?
Sure.
Yeah, so you could have your
Why
meat
couldn't
and
you
your
just
bread.
start a fire?
It would take a long time.
They would,
Kindle it.
didn't have matches.
Didn't have any matches?
No, they didn't have matches. I looked it up how they did it, and they.
Have you ever started a fire like that?
No, but no.
How long does it
It's a
take?
very long time.
It takes it. I remember we watched Yeshua do that in the Chosen movie when he was with the children. He was out. He was starting a fire,
Yeah.
and it took several. And he was working up a sweat doing that. So what they would do, they would they would take coals from other fires, and that's how. And fire would keep going. That was their automatic range.
Yeah.
And by the way, Susan,
Yes, ma'am.
the verse that says something about keeping cold on my enemies,
Oh.
that's actually a blessing. Bless my enemies. Because when you keep coals on someone, you are giving them from your fire pot so that they will have plenty in their fire pot.
Oh. So we can keep.
So it's not go get them, God sick 'em. Instead, it's not like
Oh shoot! It's a blessing. Wow.
The right kindling, it took about a half hour to start fires like that.
Oh, yeah.
You were a bad Boy Scout.
So if they had to do that, can you imagine 3 million people out there?
Oh, wait.
And now we got to start. Well, and the husband's going, hurry up, make the bread. It's got to be done. Where's the fire? Yeah. And so what happened is the mom had the kneading bowl, the dough, and the dad had the fire pot, and it's just boom here, and they're going, what happened? Where are we?
Well, how come they didn't show that in the Ten Commandments? With Charles and Heston, they didn't write it. That's
Yeah.
true. That's
Yeah,
true.
we have a real hard time. We have a hard time with somebody telling us yes, and we have a hard time with miracles, believing miracles.
So all this time, I've been trying to figure out, what's the big deal with unleavened bread? So what? Matzah, there you go. And now I'm realizing something. You cannot understand the miracle if you think that the dough is leavened. Because if the dough is leavened, then it's just like baking any other bread. The whole point is that they were moved so fast that the dough didn't have a chance to be leavened. And so if you water that down, then you don't understand.
If
That's why they talk about it. that it was unleavened, and then when they got there, it was still unleavened.
It was still unleavened.
That's why the whole thing.
That's why it's a miracle. So we can take that, and last week we started taking this a step further because Myra came up with this. I thought, well, of course, that's a natural fit. So they're to do this for 7 days.
Eat unleavened.
Eat unleavened bread. So I would rather imagine there they are, because they hadn't prepared victuals, so they were just, it was whatever kneading stuff they had in there. And I'm sure that the Lord just kind of kept multiplying the bread in their baskets.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Because he did that later on in the Galilee, didn't he?
Yeah,
Twice.
That's right.
And the bread didn't go away.
Right.
And that wasn't leavened bread. I mean, that wasn't unleavened bread that time, but it makes total sense that this was just, and they're going, wow. And then when the 7 days were over, they ran out of unleavened bread, and now they're starting to complain because, well, now what are we going to eat? Now what are we going to eat? How many ways can we say that? Now what are we going to eat? And he said, and that's when the manna from heaven started appearing on the ground. Okay?
How come they didn't hunt while they were
I don't know. They had all those animals.
In the desert to hunt, except Gila monsters and
Whatever.
snakes.
Except that they had all
in the desert all the time?
they had all their livestock. They had all their
Their
livestock.
livestock, that is right. They had their livestock.
Susan, so when Yeshua stood up there with all those people, 5,000 people out in front of him,
Yes.
he could have done anything to witness to them who he was.
Yep.
But he didn't. He chose to feed them.
Yes.
And every one of them knew the Torah. We think they were like us, but they weren't. They lived the Torah day and night. They all knew the Torah. So he stands up there and he starts feeding them bread, and they're all going, this is just like the wilderness. When God fed us manna, is this God? Bingo. They knew who he was.
And beyond that, we're getting close to the time of Sukkot, one of those times. Never mind. Never mind. That's because he would have had to been up in Jerusalem and he was in Galilee. Never mind.
Trying to think about this whole thing, is it actually saying that? And it is.
It is saying it.
Because, I was looking back in the past here, and it says that the people took their dough before it was leavened.
Yep.
So it would have said flour, it was flour.
Right.
Yep.
So it says dough.
Yep.
Dough is something that's mixed with water. I'm trying to think, I'm like, now, are we trying to read too much into this?
No, Jeff. I started this 10 years ago, and I'm telling you, every year it doesn't change, or every time I go through it doesn't change. It's the word Pesach, which is flour and water mixed together before it's fermented. Yep.
Yeah. And the other thing too, I saw one time that at work we had a guy, Vanderlaan, I think his name was.
Yep. Ray Vanderlaan.
Ray Vanderlaan, and he had gone through Egypt, and he was showing an Arab group of men who actually were putting fire. I actually had a fire burned down the coals, and they had bread, or a dough I should say, and they actually put it in the coals, and they kept on flipping it every so often.
Oh, wow.
Oh, there you go.
Coals. So they didn't actually have to have an oven per se. They actually just had to have a.
But they had to have a fire pot that had the coals in
way of
it.
putting it in
Yeah.
a fire, so that way
Yeah.
you just flipped it inside the fire, and the coal itself.
Called tortillas.
Kind of blackish, somewhat because of that.
Yeah.
Burned because of the coal.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's how they did it.
That's how they did it.
That's
Yeah.
how you cook tortillas.
That's how you do it.
And flip them back and forth.
Do they do it over the top of the coals?
No, well, they do.
Not anymore.
Griddle.
On a griddle,
Yeah.
cast iron,
Okay.
but they have to do that.
Flip, yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's all about bread.
I know.
He's the bread.
He's the bread of life. We fight wars over bread. I mean, it all kind of comes back to the bread, doesn't it? And whether or not it's leavened or unleavened or gluten-free or.
They changed it.
They changed it. Yeah, they changed it.
Just because they changed.
Okay.
Wow, they changed the wheat.
Okay. So, I haven't lost anybody. Does that make sense? That this whole entire group of 3 million people. This is, and I'm telling you. So this is a rehearsal for the rapture. And I had given up on the rapture a long time ago. And all of a sudden it's back here. But with a switch, but with a change. He's not taking us out there, he's coming here.
Right.
right?
He's coming here, but then we're going to Jerusalem.
Right, the New Jerusalem.
The New
Come down.
Thank you. And Jerusalem it's one of those words, one of those Hebrew words that means that there's two of them. Just like you have two legs, rega, reglaim, if you have two of them. Jerusalem is the way it's pronounced. It's got that ending on it, meaning that there's two. And if you get to the end of our book, chapter 7, Revelation, you will see it. It's as plain as can be. Jerusalem number 1 and Jerusalem number 2.
You're right, it's not just two, but a matched pair.
A matched pair.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
wow.
Matching pair of
Yeah.
things.
That's why you have a pair of things.
So
Yeah.
one Jerusalem here, one
What-
Jerusalem there.
That's exactly right. Yay. God, he's got he is so smart. He's got us covered. Next way, yes.
So it's safe to say that
Safe to say.
God can rapture or translate
Yes.
Right.
anybody, anytime he wants to, and as many people as he wants to.
That's
I mean,
right.
he did that with Philip.
Yeah, I was
He
gonna
did
say.
that with Enoch. He did it with Enoch. He did it with Elijah.
He did it with 3 million people
Yes,
here. He
yeah.
did it
This is nothing to
with
him.
AD, he did it.
Right. It's nothing to him. I mean, it's not a problem. It's not a problem if it's one person or 3 million people, or
Not Star Trek.
and it's not Star Trek. No. No, this is God. And you guys just stop and think. We more than likely are the generation that's going to get to see this stuff.
Oh, boy.
And you thought you wanted to sit down and talk to Abraham. I'm telling you, Abraham wants to sit down and talk with you. He's going to go, wow. Leonard, would you go out and have coffee with me this morning? Because I want to find out what it was like there.
How would you bake me a cake?
Back
The
then.
Bible, it says the angels wish that they could be.
Yes, the angels wish that yes, that's exactly right. Okay, well, let's find out who it is that gets to partake in this Passover, because it's not for everybody. I mean, it is for everybody, but not everybody, let's see, how can I say this? It is for everybody, but not everybody gets to partake of it. Okay? That's where the power of choice comes in. It's amazing. Steve, take me. 43 to 51, and we'll finish this up.
And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "This is the ordinance of the Passover. No foreigner shall eat it, but every man's servant who is bought for money. When you have circumcised him, then he may eat it. A sojourner and a hired servant shall not eat it. In one house it shall be eaten. You shall not carry any of the flesh outside the house, nor shall you break one of its bones. All the congregation of Israel shall keep it. And when a stranger dwells with you and wants to keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, and then let him come near and keep it. And he shall be as a native of the land. For no uncircumcised person shall eat it. One law shall be for the native born and for the stranger who dwells among you." Thus all the children of Israel did. As the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did. And it came to pass on that very same day that the Lord brought the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, according to their armies.
Okay, that last verse should tell us that. On that very same day. Does anybody say anything other than on that very same day?
Nope.
It says on that very same day the Lord brought the children of Israel out of Egypt according to their armies or their tribes, how they were organized by their host. Okay, so every man's servant that's bought for money, he can eat it if he's circumcised. All the congregation of Israel shall keep it, because they're all supposed to be circumcised, either flesh or of heart. One law shall be for him in his home and to the stranger that sojourns among you. Foreigner can eat it, a sojourner shall not. Somebody who's just passing through, let him pass through. He's not to eat it.
This translation says heathen.
Heathen instead of sojourner.
Yeah,
Okay.
that has to be somebody under the covenant.
Okay. Yep. One who does not join himself to the God of the Israelites, to the covenant, shall not eat it. That's a sojourner. One law shall be for the native born and for the stranger who dwells among you. One Torah for the native and the stranger. In all your seed, comes the promise of Abraham. Starting to come into view. The promise to Abraham is coming into view here. In all your seed.
This has been a presentation of Fellowship of Messiah with teacher Susan Miller. Video editing by Joel Thompson. If you've enjoyed this video, please click the thumbs up icon below the screen on the left, and subscribe by clicking the bell icon below this video and to the right to be notified of each new video we post. Know someone else who'd love this video? Click the arrow pointing to the right in the upper right hand corner of this video and share. Until next time, Shavua Tov. Have a good week. And may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his everlasting peace and harmony in every area of your life. In Hebrew, that is, Yivarekeka Yahuwah v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Yahuwah panav alecha v'yikuneka, Yisa Yahuwah panav alecha v'yasem lecha shalom.